The three elements are: first, it's self-awareness; second, relationship building; and third, clear communication. So what I mean by that is the first one is self-awareness. This is, how do I be curious about myself? How do I practice inward curiosity? How do I ask myself questions? How do I think about respect? What's that based on? Who taught me that? That's self-awareness. The second one is relationship building. So this is, how do I be curious about other people? That's the outward curiosity. And also let them be curious about me. I have to share my stories too. So Tamir, I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm also going to share myself. And you know what that is? Reciprocity, back and forth. I'm sure you've all been part of conversations where someone is asking you all these questions, and you might even feel really good and interesting, and yet you realize, oh, you didn't learn anything about them at the end. How do you have a relationship when it's just one way? A lot of people, I hear people say, oh, it's not my job to educate people. Well, I'm not looking for an education. I'm looking for engagement. So that's why that second one is, how do I also be curious about how Libby thinks about respect? And Libby, I'm going to share how I think about it. I'm going to react to what your stories are, and I'm going to share my stories with you, and then allow you to react and interpret mine. And that back and forth is reciprocity. That's how we build relationships, by knowing one another. And the third element of practicing curiosity is clear communication. So this is, how do we listen to understand? How do we ask questions when we don't understand? And how do we tell stories? How do we give specific examples? So when I ask, I often in workshops, I'll poll people, how well do you think across these three different elements, making time for self-reflection, relationship building, listening, asking questions, sharing clear examples. And I'll ask them, how do your colleagues rank? Check all the ones that they're not good at, and then check the ones that you're not good at. Listening often comes up as, other people aren't good at it, but I'm pretty good at it. So that goes back to the self-awareness part, right? So there's listening, there's asking questions. 70% of people in the workplace actually say they face barriers asking questions. In my work, we've determined 8 reasons why people don't ask questions, including, I don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want people to think my boss didn't prepare me for this. Lots of different reasons. And then they're sharing specific examples. And so relating this back to respect, often when people can talk in abstracts. So I'll give you the example of punctuality. Oftentimes when I say, well, what does respect look like to you? And they'll say, oh, well, it's about being on time. Punctuality is really important. Well, why is that important? Because it's respectful. Well, why is it respectful? Because it is. That's what you're supposed to do. And instead, what are the clear stories that are associated with it? Because people will remember what your stories are, not just what they'll remember your why. It's not about remembering just what the forms of respect are. And so just to recap there, that is self-awareness, relationship building, and clear communication. And also a fun fact with self-awareness, most people think that they're self-aware, and yet only 10 to 15% of them actually fit that criteria. Studies have shown this. And also, if you talk to someone who says, I'm always self-aware, that's the person who is not self-aware. Right? Because it's also, this practice of curiosity is, I didn't know that about me. I'm surprised I had that reaction. If I'm surprised, that means there's something I didn't know about me. And so we actually try to encourage people to delight in being surprised rather than hiding it. Oh, there's still more to know. We can even be mysteries to ourselves. So, that's what we'll be. So today, what I'm going to lead you through is the self-awareness exercises. When I do that poll I was telling you about, what people think about their colleagues and what they think about themselves, oftentimes people say where they both agree is actually making time for self-reflection. They'll say, my colleagues don't make time for self-reflection, and I don't make time for self-reflection. How many mishaps can be prevented if we just paused? We just took a bit of time to pause. And with respect, there's the difference between disrespect and lack of respect. Disrespect is actually intentional. It's, Tamara, I know you didn't like it and I did it anyway. Ha ha ha. Right? But maybe Elise told me every time I came late to her meetings that it's not a big deal. So, and inside, Elise is actually seething. But that's a lack of respect because I didn't know that. And maybe Elise actually said it was okay. Right? So just to know the difference, and that's just to pause when we're feeling disrespected, to pause and go, is this disrespect? Or is this lack of respect? And either way, we should actually then go and ask and go figure it out. So yes, those are the main things. Oh, and I'll actually say one other thing. I know that Alana, you took the quiz, right? There's the 7 forms of respect quiz. And that is not meant to be, and you always like these forms and you do prioritize these forms. Another misconception about the 7 forms of respect is that it works like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or one of those, or even actually even in 5, I would say 5 love languages is a little more consistent. With respect is dynamic. It constantly changes depending on who we're interacting with and the context. Am I working with my team? Or am I working with a bigger organization? Am I talking to a client or to a vendor? Hierarchy, power dynamics is a big part in work relationships. And so it's going to change. And are we contradictory, or are we actually flexing to the situation? And so actually with the quiz and with our assessment, we want it to actually help people gain some self-awareness about how these behaviors, what are we actually doing most of the time? What do we actually care about? Does it actually must matter to us? Is that a must, a could, or won't? That's practicing self-awareness. And that's that first practice of curiosity. So I'm going to tee up the first exercise. And the first exercise is self-reflection on who and what influenced how we think about respect. And this is personal. We all have these different stories. And again, this is, if we can share the stories, then it will help people understand and remember more. And we all belong to multiple cultures, communities, and identities at the same time, and they're tugging at us in different ways, right? I'm a firstborn. Being an oldest child is a really, I see Elise nodding, yeah, right? Versus like an only child or a middle child, or being part of a big family or a small family. Did you have to fight to get your words in or not? Then also I'm Vietnamese, I'm American, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, I'm a Gen Xer, I'm an employer. So these are all these different parts of my identity that will then influence how I think about respect. So there are the 7 forms, and for this, the purposes, you don't have to know all of them, but I'll just go through them. It's we use the acronym PICCA, PPICCAA, and it stands for punctuality, procedure, information, candor, consideration, acknowledgement, and attention. And so for me, candor is very important. And one of the reasons why is because when I was in college, I had this professor who would just tear up my writing. He literally said, your writing is like vomit. Oh. And actually, I really felt he wanted me to get better, though. I mean, he had a very tough way of doing it. So he just went in. And then when I went to grad school, I had this professor who was and this was in the UK. So he's just, everything is lovely. And I was like, no, come on, give it to me. I can handle this. And I actually found out from one of his early PhD students, that he was so tough on her that one day she just broke down and cried. And he said, what's wrong? He was just, isn't there anything good? He's like, no, there are so many great things. I just thought that we should just work on what needs to be improved. So he adjusted. And by the time I studied with him, he had kind of gone on to this other end. Do you see how we will change and evolve too, depending on our experiences with people? Because we had a very different, his early student versus me, who came to him about 10 years later, we had really different experiences.